growth mindset. We were trying to speed it up a little bit, obviously, because it was lunchtime, but let's go back just a bit. The growth mindset means that you're open to new information and opportunities. The fixed mindset is going to be somebody who's closed off to new perspectives, does it the way that they've done it all the time. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is how I do it. This is how I've always done it. This is how I'm going to continue to do it. A growth mindset is going to be somebody who's willing to listen to what you have to say and incorporate some new things into the old stuff. We want to be in the growth mindset. The reason for that, obviously, is in its name. You want to be able to grow. You want to be able to be flexible. You want to be able to enhance what you already have. Just because you did it that way 100 times doesn't mean it was the right way or the best way. Be open and to experiences and to new information. So the critical question that you're going to ask yourself is, what's important now? It's a great acronym, WIN, right? For the win. What's important now? Let me look at what's important right now. Is it important right now that I get angry at the person who cut me off? No. Right? What's important right now is that I didn't get hurt. My family's okay. You know, I have 2 daughters. One that I spoke about, Frankie, she's 8. I have another daughter, Danny. She is a year old. She looks like she's about 6 months. She looks like Stewie Griffin, no hair. If I brought up the pictures, and anybody who knows her, they'll attest to it. She looks just like Stewie Griffin. She just doesn't have that I'm going to kill you Lois look. So we're lucky there. But what's important now in that situation is that they're okay, right? So if I focus on that and I have a more optimistic way of looking at that, I can kind of throw that flag on myself and realize, all right, well, maybe traffic is something that sets me off. Maybe being cut off in traffic. Well, let me think a little bit further. Why? What value or belief maybe got trampled by what happened? And for me, one of my biggest values and one of my biggest beliefs is respect. I feel like everybody deserves respect and everybody should give respect. So if somebody's cutting me off, they don't value my life. They don't respect my life or my kids. Well, that's why I get so passionate about it. What's important now? Button's working. There we go. So after that critical question, we're going to consider a new play for our reaction. Right? We want to make sure it doesn't interfere with our goal, our performance, or our relationships. One of the biggest things on this is relationships. In the domains and tenets, there's a word, it's called connectedness. Connection. What does that mean? Well, that's probably one of the most important because it's about how we connect to one another. Not just the people that you value, but everybody. I can have a connection with you as a stranger and it be a positive connection. I can have a connection with you as a stranger and have it be a negative connection. How would you want to leave that person? Probably with the positive. Connection. Connectiveness. We're humans. Love. So relationships is big for me, and should I change it right away? If I'm driving my 2 children down 295 or 95 in Philly, whichever way we go, and I'm flipping off people and I'm cursing at them and I'm doing, what example am I setting for my kids? Yeah, I should throw a flag on myself and I should change my play. I can internalize a little bit better and control that reaction and those thoughts, right? And I can change my pattern of thinking to where I'm not so reactive on a negative way. All right, little video. Are the videos attached? Okay.
Again, this is the USS Montana requesting that you immediately divert your course 15 degrees to the north to avoid a collision. Over.
Please divert your course 15 degrees to the south to avoid collision.
This is Captain Hancock. You will divert your course. Over.
Negative, Captain. I'm not moving anything. Change your course. Over.
Son, this is the USS Montana, the second largest vessel in the North Atlantic Fleet. You will change course 15 degrees north, or I will be forced to take measures to ensure the safety of this ship. Over.
This is the lighthouse, mate. It's your call. Hello, Captain.
All right, so a couple things I want to point out here. A, that would never happen to the Army. Sorry, Navy guys, but we don't run into lighthouses, so that works for me. I also love when the captain is talking, and he's getting all dominant. This is the USS Montana, blah, 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 right? And then the lackey's like, yeah, that's right. Sometimes you got to change your play. Sometimes there's a lighthouse, right? And you have to direct your course in a different direction. And you have to be aware of that. Self-awareness is huge in what this program is, as well as the self-regulation to be able to take that and maybe chart your course a little differently. Right? So the regulation is important after the awareness. You've got to be aware of it first, and then you move your course. Check your playbook. If your reactions interfere with your performance goals or relationships, if you find yourself repeating the same patterns. Remember we were talking about the growth and the fixed mindset, and there was that image of the tracks and how the track just is ingrained, and there's grass and flowers all over, but in there is just that bit of mud and the tire tracks. Your brain does that on purpose. You get stuck in patterns. We're going to be talking about cognitive traps a little bit later. You're going to be stuck in these repeating patterns. How do you snap yourself out of it? Well, you got to be aware of it first. Right? Self-awareness leads to self-regulation, leads to acceptance. If your reactions are uncharacteristic for you, I'm a mild-mannered individual according to all of you, right? You have no idea. You talk to my wife, I'm an asshole. It's true. You know, I just found out that the director thinks that I'm the mean Brian, which is fine. It's fine. I'm okay with it. But, you know, if it's uncharacteristic for you, if you're normally a mild-mannered person, and just because you got cut off in traffic that day, you start flying off with F-bombs and, you know, following people home, maybe you need to change your play up a little bit. Maybe you need to throw that flag on yourself. Be the NFL official that throws the pass interference flags over and over and over and over again. All right. How to use your playbook. What influenced your reactions? These are the things you're going to ask. What is most important to you? Choose a course in line with your performance, values, and goals. And should you consider a new play? The one thing that you're going to be aware of here is you're probably going to find out what your values are. You might not even know that you have a ingrained core value of, you know, respect being a number one. Like I can tell you that I've had that aha moment, and I know for a fact if you disrespect me, it's going to set me off, because I feel I believe people should respect each other. That's a core value of mine, and I know that. I'm aware of that now. I was not before I started this program, and how much it affected the way I presented myself in certain situations. Now that I'm aware of that, I can regulate that a little bit and understand that there's going to be times where people aren't in the awareness of what they're doing. And I have to take account of that because I can control me. I can't control you. Should I consider a new play? I will be followed by the great Dr. Lieutenant Michael Wiltsey.
You're embarrassing. In more ways than one, but... So we talked earlier about the ABC model and awareness of thought patterns. Am I going the right way? Let's make sure. Say I did it again. It seems naturally for this thing to go on your finger the other way. So the brain and the building awareness is, you know, the first part. But then I had kind of, you know, hinted to, like the end of a Netflix show, that there was more to that, right? That we're going to follow up with that and say, okay, now what? Now that I'm aware of these thoughts, right? So the module or the lesson that talks about that is something called balance your thinking, or a quicker version of that, instant balance your thinking. So once we become aware of those automatic thoughts that happen to us, it's really important to understand, okay, well, in what ways are those automatic thoughts affecting us in a negative way, right? If it's bringing us down, if it's spiraling us down, and you know it immediately when it happens to you because you're going to feel it physiologically, right? You have a physiological sensation of it as far as maybe your heart races, or you get, you feel anxious inside, you feel angry inside, right? Or you just feel that physical stress that comes from those negative or in psychology, what we call them negative thoughts or maladaptive thoughts, right? In resiliency, we call them cognitive traps, right? Thinking traps or thinking errors. And we want to recognize that so that now we can maybe change those patterns. So how do we know? And these all, as you're hopefully seeing today, a lot of these lessons are piggybacking off of each other. And the whole program is designed to do that, to reinforce how each one of these lessons are intertwined as far as, how do we reduce stresses in our life, right? And reduce the outcome of that stress, of anxiety, depression, and feeling overwhelmed. So if we're having unproductive behaviors, right? And again, we've heard it already, uncharacteristic ways of responding, right? If your normal response is, maybe you experience this with a coworker. You talk, and we referenced this a little earlier. You might see something in a coworker. Their normal response every day, as you're seeing my friend Brian Martino up here, his normal everyday response is to be much like the guy that he is today. He's funny, he's joking all the time. He's very responsive like that. That's normal to me from knowing Brian through the years. If I see Brian on a different day and Brian's not acting like that, then I know that something's up with Brian. That something's going on. So that's uncharacteristic for the way that Brian behaves. And we have to recognize that in others, but recognize that in ourselves. Or maybe we fly off the handle when we normally aren't the type of person that flies off the handle to our children, for example, or our spouse, or a coworker or a friend, right? Or we shrug them off. So it's recognizing those patterns and uncharacteristics. Ultimately, the goal there is that those types of things are going to interfere with your ability to carry out what it is that you are trying to accomplish. Think about this, law enforcement professionals, in whatever capacity you work in law enforcement. But if we're aware now and we're talking about this and we're becoming much more of a resilient community and culture, to do so and continue this, right, that last part is really important, right? What are we all trying to do? And I say this all the time in any kind of law enforcement class I'm teaching, or the people I work with, or whenever someone's even feeling down or negative about things, is that everyone in this room is here for a common purpose, right? And if you got into law enforcement, you got into it for the same common purposes, right? So we're all trying to accomplish the same goals. But we're aware that these stressors that we're talking about, these cumulative stresses, the things that we see, and then the small little triggers and minor things like we talked about in the ABC model, and you've heard a little bit about, in all of your organizations, all of our organizations, that we, again, as Brian just said, that we play a role in, right? How we interpret those, how we respond to those events, what we think is important and not important. All of that adds up and gets in the way of our ultimate goals that we're trying to accomplish, right? For investigating crime, treating people, fairly and in the jails, prosecuting cases, whatever it is that we're doing, right? It gets in the way of what we're trying to accomplish. And that goes for law enforcement, but we want to do that, if we practice those things on an everyday basis in the way that we interact with each other, then obviously it's going to filter over, and that's really what this resilience program is about. So anytime that these maladaptive thoughts or negative thinking patterns, the things that we recognized earlier, they're going to spiral us down that path, when we start recognizing those and can make an effort to change those, we're going to influence, and be able to place our thoughts more in line with what our goals and values and our objectives are. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. Brian, I always ask Brian Lloyd to speak about this meme that's on here.
This is Pebble Island. All right, so anybody that hasn't, spoiler alert here, if you haven't seen Sixth Sense, that's your own fault. That movie's been out long enough, all right? You're going to know the ending of this, but if you've seen Sixth Sense, you kind of understand the meme there. But if you haven't seen Sixth Sense, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. You should have seen it by now.
So how do we do this, right? So that's the key, is like we're aware that we're having a negative thought pattern, or we're aware that even if it's not, we may not be aware that it's a negative thought or something that's driving that negative emotional response or behavior, but we are aware of the negative emotional response or behavior, right? You know when you're stressed, or you know when you're angry, or you know when you're engaging in those uncharacteristic behaviors that we talked about. So once you recognize that, then we go back, right? And we say, okay, what's causing me to feel this way? Like, why am I acting in this way? Why am I responding? Why am I being so short or quick-tempered with the people I'm working with, or in my home life, or with my children? What is it? What happened? And then we want to look at, okay, well, what did I think about that event? Like, what am I thinking about as far as this interaction that's now influencing it? What are my thoughts? What are your thoughts? The whole concept of, cognitive behavioral psychology type of thing, and that's my background for psychology, but the whole concept, this like screams of this, because that's what that concept is. Like, we got to look at your thoughts, change those thoughts, that changes your behavior and your emotions, right? Well, that's what this slide is basically, and this concept is talking about. We have to recognize the thoughts. Here's the deal. Lots of people look at this. Lots of people research this. And for one reason or another, in especially American culture, I guess, Western culture, but there's a tendency at times for us to think negatively, right? That there's a tendency to kind of look at the glasses half empty type of a thing. And when you talk about law enforcement, right, cynicism built into the culture that sort of is not only, in New Jersey, but American law enforcement traditionally, right, we become cynical very quickly, and we see a lot of the bad in people. We see a lot of the negative, deal with a lot of negative experiences. So as a result, we might have that tendency even more so to see things as the glass half empty. But what we know is that once that happens, once people start to think along those lines in that negative way, it is really, really difficult for us to shift our thoughts to a more positive way of looking at things, right? And why is that? Because for each one of you that can relate to what I'm saying, and we all should be able to relate to it, that you've had those quick negative thoughts or negative patterns, or you reacted that way to a traffic accident, or you responded real quickly or negatively to an event, or the first time you hear about a shift change or something at work, it throws your whole life into a disarray, or whatever the thing that gets us, right? And it's normal. But we all have those experiences, but that we respond to it and then we move on. What I'm asking you to do, and talking like some foreign language probably, is to actually analyze, look at our thoughts. Well, who's got time for that? Who wants to do that, right? Or who thinks that's significant or important, right? Most of the time we operate automatically. We're not going to do that. So the reason why it's hard to shift once we start in that negative mindset and shift over to that positive mindset is because it takes mental energy for us to do that. It takes actual, work for us to do that. But I referenced this earlier, that in order for us to make this program work, right, in order for the 5 of us who have gone through the training, have given this speech a number of times, talked about these slides, in order for us to practice what we preach, each person up here trained in this a number of times. Brian trained in this more than anyone up here. Has to work on this all the time. All the time. Am I wrong? So my point is that it's not, again, I'll go back to my, we're not going to, all of a sudden just anoint you as resilient today, or even after the resiliency officers who are in the audience attend the 2.5-day training as being resilient. That you have to work on this, right? We, as a culture in law enforcement, have to work on this because it's important. We know, right? Dr. Genovese talked about, and we know just as far as psychological research is concerned, that if you do these things, if you do work on this, it will improve your health physically, mentally, right? It will reduce anxiety. It will reduce depression. It will reduce overall stress in your everyday life. It will lead to better outcomes for you, finishing your career, being able to retire, and seeing less suicides in law enforcement. That's why we need to work on it. So when we say these things and talk about this, that's what I mean. This is an active process that we need to work on. Right? So obviously this hits mostly on mental, but the mental domain as far as our thought patterns, and addressing the mental component of resiliency, but also the social, because this has to do with how we interact and communicate with others. A great video that is part of this program that really exemplifies when people are quick to make quick decisions, quick judgments with little information, and then respond to that is the taco party.
Hey, everyone's eating tacos outside Bill's office.
Do you think that's some information I would like to know? I like tacos. You invited Eric? I thought Eric gave you the creeps. Oh. Yeah. Hey.
Don't be left behind. Get it first with AT&T, the nation's fastest mobile broadband network. Period. Rethink possible.
Great example, right? But how often does that kind of thing happen for us? Right? How often? I mean, everybody in here can relate to a story like that, where we've responded to something so quickly without all the information, or we've misinterpreted the actual event, right? And then he feels dejected, like, you know, he's not included, they don't like me here, they invited the creepy guy, not me. It's, you know, so it becomes, it sets a whole stage. Had he not received that text inviting him to the taco party, right, that his whole day would have went down that bad path, right? So, we recognize the thought, we say, okay, what's causing me to think this way? And we have to build awareness of some common cognitive traps. What gets us there? What makes us kind of feel those negative emotions or respond in that negative way? The ones that we talk about in resilience, and there's in, you know, cognitive therapy stuff, there are, you know, lists of 17 and 22 different cognitive distortions, and the reality is that there's as many cognitive distortions as there are, you know, ways of thinking about something in a negative way. So someone just puts a name to it. But these 5 that are on this slide and part of the resiliency program are ones that are sort of like most people can relate to, and they're easy to understand, and you can see how they can lead you down a negative path. Right? So all or nothing thinking, confirmation bias, blaming others, blaming yourself, and mind reading. All or nothing thinking is just as it sounds. It's black or white thinking. It's 2 categories, dichotomous thinking. This one's tough for my law enforcement peers, right? Because a lot of law enforcement world is black and white. A lot of what we deal with as far as looking at, you know, you either violated, you know, the criteria necessary of a crime or not, you know. There's in a courtroom a lot of times, right, as far as presenting the facts. So, but the world is the world, and what we need to understand is that the world doesn't operate like that. Like that human beings, human interaction, human life is not black or white. Most of human life happens in the gray area. That's where most of our interactions and life interactions happen. It's not all or nothing thinking. And the reality is that when we begin thinking in that all or nothing way, that's a telltale sign or something, a red flag that's going to head us down a bad path. The example is everything, always, never, those types of words. And it's the diet example of, you know, I ate a piece of cake. Renee joked about something like this earlier, but I ate a piece of cake. So as far as, you know, you're trying to be on a diet, you eat a piece of cake, and you say, your response to that is, you know what, I'm a complete failure, I can never stick to a diet, you know, I don't even know why I try or why I bother. That's all or nothing thinking, right? It's putting everything in one box, putting everything in one side. But it takes away contextual factors or anything that has to do with the situation. It takes away other aspects. I coach. Anyone who coaches in here? You know, people coach, right? Coach your kids, right? A great example of this in coaching my son's baseball team is when, you know, I see this a lot. My son's 8, and he comes off a baseball field, right? And some of his teammates come in, and maybe somebody, you know, missed a play out on shortstop, and they come in and they're all dejected, like a little 8-year-old boy, you know, and just like upset because they feel like they disappointed the team, or you know, let the team down, or that they'll say things like, you know, I'm horrible, I'm no good at baseball, I never should play baseball, right? That's all or nothing thinking, right? as a coach, as a leader, as a supervisor, as a fellow human, right, there's a wonderful opportunity to step in and say, that's not true, you know? That's not true. You just made 6 great plays all game, and you missed one. You missed one. How are you not a good baseball player? How does that equate to you're a horrible baseball player? You should never play baseball, right? But that example happens. And if you've coached, and you coach young kids, you probably have seen what I'm saying as far as the way kids can get down on themselves about something so minor. But hopefully that also shows you what I was speaking about, is that this is cultural, right? That we're dealing with this as far as our human, culture and experiences. So that's, and if you've seen in schools, you're seeing a lot of resilience movement in schools. I see it in my school. It's really awesome. I think that resilience as a concept is not just about law enforcement. It's not just about the military. It's in all professions, and it's hitting our schools where it really needs to happen, and start building more resilient people. But those are examples from baseball, right? Confirmation bias is looking at things only as you see them. Confirmation bias should be very familiar to law enforcement. It's in forensics, or Brian and I, in crime scene stuff, in the way that we operate, fingerprint science. If we're looking at only evidence that's going to confirm what we already believe, then it's going to lead down a bad path. So if you think negatively, and you think, I'm the worst baseball player, look at how many times I've gotten, I made an error, and it takes someone else to point out the good things, right? But that's what we do. We drive that. We look at only negative stuff, and then we filter out anything positive, right? Drives us down that hole. Blaming others, right? Anyone have an argument with their spouse ever? No, me either. So when we are in an argument with a spouse, right, a lot of times we may blame them, we may completely blame ourselves, not likely, but we would definitely, we have a tendency to blame someone else a lot of times, but sometimes we do. Sometimes we do blame ourselves for that example or any other example. Right? And lastly, mind reading. If I could, speak about something. If you take something home from this little tidbit today, as far as this lesson of the training, mind reading, right? When we're dealing with people, interpersonal relationships, if I'm talking to you and you and I are not expressing what it is that we really want to say or need to say to each other, and I'm just thinking what I think you think, and you're thinking what I think, right? Mind reading each other, right? That puts us down a very, very bad path, right? Leads us to this idea. We really don't know how we feel unless we express it. And we need to get better at that in our interpersonal relationships, as far as, your spouse, significant other, but the people we work with as well. We balance our thinking by examining evidence, check for double standards, or phone a friend, right? Our lawyers in the room should be good at this, right? Examine the evidence for and against a thought, right? The baseball kid coming off the field, examine the evidence for it. How many times have you made a great play versus that one error? Right? Would you judge Jimmy on the team just like you're judging yourself, right? Well, no, because he's pretty good, most times. But, so why not you then? Why don't you see yourself that way? Or phone a friend. Ask someone you care about. Ask someone who cares about you. Don't ask someone who's just going to give you the answer you think you want to hear, though. You have to ask someone that you trust, give you an honest answer, but usually that answer will be honest and balanced and much more fair to ourselves than we can tend to be to ourselves at times. Instant balance your thinking, I'm just going to buzz through that just so you understand the difference. All it is basically the first two. We don't have time to phone a friend, right? But we can examine the evidence for and against. And basically, it's for the quick times. The best example is today, before we came out here to give this talk, we could focus on some of the things like there's going to be 1,400 people there, it's going to be broadcast live, and oh my gosh, what do we get into, type of thing, and focus on, let that spiral us down this idea of, I don't know how it's going to go, and get worked up about that. But instead, we can say, you know what? Doesn't matter. We've done this a number of times. We know this material. The people here want to hear this material. That's what they're here for. And let's go out and nail it like Brian Martino. All right, Brian, you're up.
Thank you. Lesson number 7 is your capitalizing on strengths lesson. For all us leaders or aspiring leaders in here, this is your leadership lesson. All right? Capitalizing on strengths is huge. Identify your strengths in yourself. All right? I like to say, stay within your wheelhouse. Another example of myself staying within my wheelhouse, when I was in college, I went to Rowan University. The real RU for anybody else that yeah. What did I do? Did I just trigger somebody? Good. Good. So I went to Rowan University. I was a mediocre student, right? I wasn't lighting the world on fire. I played soccer. That was mostly my goal. Just go there, have fun, and play soccer. One of my best friends was across the river at University of Pennsylvania on the track team with a bunch of really smart people. And we would occasionally, he would slum it over at Rowan University, and I would go over to UPenn. And my first thought going over there, I was pretty intimidated, right? Because my experience with people that went to UPenn is they're either really smart or they're people that have a ton of money. And either way, I don't have anything in common with any of them. So I went over there thinking, all right, I could do one of two things. I could go there and I could be Brian Lloyd, the mediocre student who's not lighting the world on fire playing soccer from Rowan University. Or I could go over there and pretend I'm like Matt, right? The green one's like the social intelligence one, right? But be your best you. That's all we could tell you to do. Be your best you. All right? That's going to give you your best performance. All right? Recognize strengths in others. All right? Like I said before, put people in positions to succeed. All right? I coach, right? Like Dr. Wiltsey, Dr. Lieutenant Wiltsey. So when I have parents that come up to me and they're like, listen, I want to put my kid in this position. I think you should try him here, put him there, put him there. I'm like, all right, hold up 1 second. All right? I'm the coach, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put your child in the best position to succeed. One, because I want them to love the sport. All right? I want them to love the sport, and I want them to have confidence that every time they step on the field that they're going to have success. All right? We're going to try them in different positions, trust me. All right? We're going to work on that stuff in practice. But I can tell you right now, what I'm going to do for your 7-year-old child is I'm going to put them in a position to succeed. All right? It's no different than when you're leading a group of people. All right? Have that growth mindset. All right? Understand that not everything has to be done exactly the same way. All right? Listen to your people. Grow. Grow as a leader. Grow as an individual. Just because one strength wasn't your top character strength doesn't mean that's not a strength that you can work on. You can grow on. All right? Use this at home. All right? Use this anywhere you can. All right? Understand there is a perfect opportunity to use your strengths, right? We all have that guy at the agency where, you know, the chief is getting in you guys, getting in your ass for something that you guys did wrong, and he's screaming at you guys. And all of a sudden that dude that always says the inappropriate thing at the wrong time pipes up from the corner, says something just loud enough that all you guys can hear it and the chief doesn't hear it, right? And you're all trying to not laugh. Right? Maybe that wasn't the right time to use the humor, even though it was probably really funny, because I know those guys, they're really funny. All right? So know when to play your strengths. Know when you're overplaying your strengths. Know when you're not playing your strengths enough. All right? Be self-aware. All right? Your team. All right? Understand the team that you have. All right? Any SWAT team that's out there, your 185-pound guy that's running marathons during the weekend, he's not going to be your Ram guy, right? Right? You're going to put the 230-pound, 6'4" guy that played linebacker at Rowan University. Right? That's going to be your Ram guy. All right? Put them in those positions so that way they're confident in what they're going to do. All right? Guys, we can't say it enough. Grow. Have that growth mindset. Be open to experiencing and trying new things so that way you can improve your strengths, you can improve the strengths of others, and improve your agency as a whole. Mindset is everything, guys. Think about that. That's what we're pushing throughout this whole program.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay, my name's Mike Parmenter. It's the first opportunity that I've got to be up here. I'm going to start out with counting my blessing. My blessing was a great 26-year career in the New Jersey State Police. I loved being on the road. I spent 11 years as an auto theft detective, And then I spent another 8 years doing major crime work. And then after 9/11, was lucky enough to be placed in a position to work as a peer within our employee assistance program. All that time building up on things that I would do later on in life in a second career or a third career, or it depends on how you look at things. But I retired. I certainly enjoyed my job in the state police, and I retired. Took a few years off and spent time with my kids. I worked in addictions in the first responder program for 3 years, and Hurricane Sandy came along, and I got to work with the Disaster and Terrorism Branch doing some disaster behavioral health work. But my dream and my desire was always to come back to the state police and to do employee assistance work. So just like anybody else, and you tie in a lot of the lessons here, I had a goal. I started doing some training and got myself into a position where I became a certified employee assistance professional. And it's just as it would happen, the day that I took my test for that, I got a call and I was hired to do employee assistance work for the state police. That is my passion. I've built upon all great jobs, all jobs that I love. And right now, this is the peak of my career. I have a job doing employee assistance work for the department that I grew up in. And I love my job. Yes, it's filled with some sadness. It's filled with some very difficult times. But nevertheless, I'm glad I'm in the position to walk beside people and help. And that's a lot of what this is all about. This is a great program. And, I'll talk a little bit about it. But I do realize we're getting a little pressed for time, so I'm going to try to move along a little bit quicker. This is about mindfulness and some other practices. But we're going to start out with something here. It's an exercise, and I'm going to ask everybody to close your eyes and do not think of this white bear. You can think of other things, but whatever you do, close your eyes and don't think of the white bear. I'm going to time it. It'll be a minute. All right, we're going to cut that short. All right, how many people were uncomfortable with that? We're not the most trusting people, cops, right? Right? I mean, we have guns on us. There could be evil people lurking around here. The guys that are doing security, they kept their eyes open probably. At least I hope they were watching out for us. So not a comfortable experience for us. But there's some things that we can do with mindfulness that are out to help us, and we'll talk about that. And if I can't get you into mindfulness, maybe I have another suggestion on some way to start that will help you out. Okay, the white bear. Often when we try to avoid something because maybe it's painful or it's just ever present in our mind. All we can do is think about it. I mean, go to bed with some negative thought, and I mean, you're going to you don't want to, you want to let it go, right? You want to let it go, but that's all you think about. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll avoid it, or we can accept it for what it is and try to move on. Okay. Again, why it matters. Have something that's troubling you, and you're able to focus on it. This stuff will improve your focus, your productivity, and your performance. And with all that, it reduces anxiety, depression, and chronic pain. And these are, again, the things that the doctors were talking about and will continue to talk about. Acceptance to stressful events. Sometimes we see some pretty difficult things. And being in the major crime unit, I've seen some of the worst things that humanity can bestow on us. Some of the most horrible things. And, many of you have seen, some of the same things that are painful and harmful. And, I can always remember, like my advice to a younger detective would be, okay, yeah, there's a body there, and that's really not the most pleasant thing that you're going to see. But that's a vessel. The spirit of that person is someone else, and we're left to work with this. This is evidence, just like, a handgun over here is evidence, and we're going to, we'll deal with it that way. To try to look at it, accept, yes, that's what it is, but turn it into something that you're going to work with in a more positive way. And sometimes that's going to be challenging. I look at some of the things that we've dealt with, and there are some certain things that just kind of knock our socks off, and they're hard to deal with. But we can change that. Okay, mindfulness, instead of putting others in their place, sometimes we need to put ourselves in the place of others. And that's a lot of what we're talking about here, is not to rush to judgment, not to initially go on the attack, but maybe understand where that person is coming from. And we all find ourselves guilty of that. I find myself guilty of that, and I try to make corrective actions to improve that in the future. Mindfulness allows you to acknowledge negative aspects of events, disengage from negative thoughts, reduce anxiety. It allows you to focus on the things you control and take purposeful action. So, with the idea of mindfulness, I've been able to practice this at times in different, work settings or groups that I've been exposed to. And, one of the things that I've found that it can be helpful. It can, if you're able to stay with it. But again, we're not the most trusting group, and we don't like really having a weapon on our side and our eyes closed and not having that awareness of what's going on. We're always concerned about things. And I figured to myself, I'm going to open my eyes to this. I'm going to embrace this, and like we said, try something new, try something out of the norm. So, with that in mind, somebody said, Mike, maybe you should try yoga. And I said, I would have never thought, well, I'll never do this. But my wife had gotten me into an 8-week boot camp program that turned into 12 weeks, and then went into a little bit more. I said, well, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm in good shape. I'll give it a try, because it's not just about, it has to do with the mind. And, I really like to hear the mind or feel the mindfulness part of this. So I asked my wife, well, what do I bring? She goes, well, there's a mat over there. And I go to the yoga place and I bring my mat, and I find out that, this is an instructor training, but I was invited to attend. And there's all these instructors there who are learning to do the Baptiste yoga. And I walked into the room, I said, wow, it's really, really hot in here. And it was hot yoga. And I didn't know about yoga, let alone hot yoga. And it was absolutely an awakening for me. So all I had was my mat and my shorts and T-shirt, and we were doing all these different things. And I've been to military basic training. I've been to the State Police Academy. I've been to the FBI National Academy, and I never sweat so much in my life. The mindfulness part of it, I never caught, because I was sweating so much. I was thinking that I was going to slide off this mat into somebody else. But it was a new experience, and it was an experience that I actually I want to go back and try again, but I want to absorb that mindfulness part of it and be a little bit better prepared. I could have brought a towel and a block and some water, but I got a little bit set up to fail. But it was a good experience, and I would encourage people, hey, try it. It was a workout. It was something different. So mindful people are more likely to be optimistic. They feel confident and self-sufficient. They can be satisfied with their lives and have positive social relationships. Went to a meeting the other day. We talked about EMDR and we talked about mindfulness. And most of the people in the room were people that did EAP work or supported the EAP roles. And there was a large number of people that talked about how much mindfulness helps them with their things. People who are mindful are less likely to be depressed or sick. It anchors yourself, it allows you to focus on your breathing. And, in that situation, the physical things in the yoga situation, I was able to focus on a lot of stuff. And I really felt like, hey, I'm not doing too bad until I started sliding all over the place. But, in mindfulness, sometimes we need to think about, we're told to think about what you're experiencing and feeling, and taking you into another place. It can be extremely relaxing. Stay present in your thoughts. Notice what's going on, in your head, what's going on in the room around you, what you're feeling in different parts of your body. Allowing, your emotions to go in and out. And it's a different experience, and I would try to, give it some consideration. Why not try it? there's lots of things on YouTube where you can do it in the privacy of your home and give it a chance. I think of mindfulness, one experience that I had was where we did mindfulness, and one of the, we opened up and ate a piece of chocolate, and it was done in a slow and deliberate manner, and we absolutely, were left in a place to not only not gobble a piece of chocolate down, but to enjoy the chocolate. And I mean, it was a different sensation. And, it always brings me back to when I get that nice cheesesteak sub, and I'm kind of in a rush, and I want to, just eat it as fast as I can. And I come back to that, and I realize that, slow down. You like this, enjoy the taste, recognize what you're doing. And sometimes we have to stop and look around us and take our time and recognize the good things that we want in life. There's some lessons in that. Okay?
Let me talk about one of my man crushes, all right, Cristiano Ronaldo. I have many man crushes, but there's no shame in my game, so I have no problem admitting that. But Cristiano Ronaldo, he practices a visualization technique. If you Google him, YouTube him, ladies, you'll appreciate it. Not only is he a physical specimen, but he is one of the best free kick takers in all of soccer. All right. For anybody that doesn't know anything about soccer, when you get fouled near the box, you get to take a free kick. And basically what it is your ability to try to shoot on net and score a goal while people kind of stand in front of you. So what he does, because he's Cristiano Ronaldo, he stands behind the ball, he closes his eyes, and he visualizes how he's going to score that goal. He hikes up his shorts. I don't know why he does that, probably because he's a physical specimen. But he closes his eyes, he visualizes him scoring that goal. And this is a tactic that he utilizes because around him are thousands and thousands of people cheering him on, rooting for him. Maybe millions of people watching him. But he puts himself in that place and he visualizes scoring that goal. And that's a technique for mindfulness. And that's why Cristiano Ronaldo is up there. And you're welcome for all of you that Google him later.
Okay, practice daily mindfulness. There's some things that you can do. Again, when you eat, take the opportunity to savor. You go to a restaurant and you buy a nice steak. Don't just put it down and feed your body, but take the time to enjoy it. Notice the sensations in your mouth, the tastes. When it rains, listen to the sound of the raindrops. That's a peaceful thing. Daily mindfulness. You can notice things in music, in songs, different ways. Control the way that you breathe. Those are things that we can utilize. And so I might not be able to sell you on mindfulness, but a long time ago, when I was making my travels for work from South Jersey to Trenton, it was about an hour and a half ride. And one of the things that I had always done was I made a lot of phone calls, during my travels, and tried to take care of work things as I could. And this is before hands-free phones and things like that. And until it just seemed to though it extended my 8-hour day into like an 11-hour day because I was always on the phone. I mean, how many of us have pulled up to our house, right? We're on the phone, we're sitting there a few minutes, the kids have their noses up against the window, the wife is standing at the door and giving you one of these, all right? And we tend to do that. And it might not be the healthiest thing because in a case like that, you're basically walking from, it's almost like walking from your work office into your house. One of the things that somebody said, Mike, what you should try is listening to books on tape that will, make a separation between the workplace and your home. And it's advice that I actually gave somebody 2 days ago. We do a lot of traveling in cars. Pick up a book on tape, learn something, learn American history, get some leadership lessons. But what you can do with that is you can maybe put that phone down and not extend your workday any more than you have to. But, try to make that separation between work and home so that when you get home, you're really more present with your family. And you're not walking right out of your, out of the office or out of the work environment and and into the home with your wife and children. I found that this has helped me, quite a bit. It allows me to relax. It keeps me off the phone, and I learn something in between. It was good advice to me, and for 15 years I've been doing it, and I've listened to books over and over again. And there's some great lessons to learn if you can do something like that. So if I can't get you to do mindfulness, maybe consider books on tape. It's simple when you have all the technology that we have in our hands and in our phones today. Okay, meaning making. We've talked about goals. We shed light on difficult situations and grow and benefit from adversity. And again, we don't grow when everything just runs smooth. We grow from life's challenges. When we have to overcome things, and for all the difficult things that I've had in my personal and professional life, as an EAP, I've recognized that there's a benefit in that for me. That I'm able to use, maybe some of the negative things that have happened or the difficult experiences, either whether they're at home or in the workplace, to help somebody out. So, adversity has allowed me to grow in that way, and it's helped me quite a bit. Okay, meaning making. Again, we turn the challenges into opportunities for growth. Growth is something that you hear a lot about here. We're talking about growth, making some changes. Situation or experience, does it mean something else? Can anything good be realized from it? And again, we have some negative things that transpire. And, last night when one of our group here texted and said, it sounds like there's going to be about, 1,500 people here. And it's like, wow, that's a lot of people. I've never talked to that many people before. But that's how many people are interested in what's going on in this movement that we're pushing out. And that's a great thing. It's a great thing to have people have passion for, to help one another. And that's what a lot of this is all about. What lessons can we learn, and how do we apply them in the future? Is this an opportunity here to increase our values, to allow us to kind of move forward in the future? And what strengths can we develop as a result of this? The strength of this program is not in the slides. The strength in this program is in the interaction that we have in the training setting. That's really where relationships are developed, where changes take place, where words that Brian or Brian might have said still ring true in my head. We've found a bond with this, and I think that this training is a great training and a great opportunity for us to look out for each other. Okay, post-traumatic growth. One of the hardest things to do when we started talking about this resiliency program in some of our meetings and how we were going to work this out was to recognize the difference between the traumatic event and what we're doing in this training. So in this training, what we're doing is we're front-loading information, we're front-loading ideas to help you before the post-traumatic or the traumatic event happens, so that we're better able to handle them when they do. And I think that that's really the important part of this is to prepare ourselves for that. Now, I'm fortunate. My wife is a social worker, and a lot of the things that we talk about in this resiliency program are a lot of things that I've heard her say, and it's almost an infusion of social work and good social skills into law enforcement, and it's something that's sorely needed. You can recognize new possibilities and have a greater appreciation of life, understanding of enhanced personal strength. We don't know what we're capable of until we maybe do a little bit of exploration. Improve relationships with others. This does give you the opportunity to make some changes to improve relationships that maybe haven't gone so well, and a greater sense of meaning. And I feel fortunate that a program like this exists, and I feel like a lot of the things that occurred in my career and the changes that I saw are leading to a really, really great time where we're able to open up and talk about things and get a greater understanding. Okay, just to point out this, we've seen this slide before. We're in this point right here where we're going to do the resiliency training. So without the resiliency training, what we were doing in the past, we would run into this event. It would be a traumatic event, and then we would go into like a traumatic stress type area and possibly develop a disorder, and then hopefully gain some resiliency and post-traumatic growth from that. With the infusion of this program, the infusion of resiliency, we're able to come in at a different level. We'll recognize that it's a bad situation, but we'll be better prepared to handle what adverse things that we face. And hopefully we won't find ourselves with that post-traumatic stress. Hopefully we'll be able to utilize coping mechanisms and achieve a greater way of handling things. Okay? Did you ever face a challenge or an adversity and you grew personally from it? I can think of many in my life, many times where, things were very, very difficult. I worked through them, and now I really utilize a lot of those life lessons, those hard lessons, as an EAP when I'm talking to, other troopers or other police officers that may be going through a similar event, where, sometimes, we don't necessarily have the boundaries that maybe a social worker would. And as I'm kind of like half a peer, half an EAP with the work that I do, because I've done the same work, the adverse things that have happened in my career I can use now in a positive sense. Okay?
Thank you. All right, me again. So we're going to talk about spiritual resilience. I'm sure that the first thing that comes to your mind is probably godliness and things like that when you think of spirituality. It's not necessarily true. There's a lot of elements that come to spiritual resilience. It's not just about going to church, which we do promote. Chaplain Ginian, I don't want you to get upset. But it's about spirituality. It's more about where you fit in and your role in life. No? Just move through. Okay. Strengthen a set of beliefs, principles, or values that sustain our sense of well-being and purpose. We all need something to strengthen those values, give us our purpose, right? The meaning-making that Mike was just talking about, finding a reason to fit in, right? What's your role? One of my biggest spiritual resilience awakenings was, not everybody can be a cop. Not everybody's built and designed to see what we see on a daily basis and deal with the people who we deal with on a daily basis. I look at that as it's a calling. It's my place. It's where I belong, right? So for spiritual resilience, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's with God. It just means that it's my role in the world. And that's something that I accepted. I'm an Army reservist as well. That's just who I am. That's what I was here for. I'm here to help and protect people who can't do it themselves. Hopefully you have that same spirituality, that same recollection. You know why you're here, what your purpose is. The ability to sustain an individual's sense of self and purpose through a set of beliefs, principles, or values. That is actually from my Facebook page. That was me. I'm so spiritual, like the earth and stuff. No, I digress. All right, we're going to have a little, this is the domains of tense, but there's a little meeting. Pardon us, we went a little long-toothed early on, so we have to kind of move along.
Man, I tell you what, Hank, about that dang old meaning of life, man, it's like this, man. You like a butterfly flapping his wings deep down in the forest, man. They're going to cause a tree fall like 5,000 miles away, man. And ain't nobody see it, nobody don't even happen. The baby's born into this world, and they don't got their friends, got nothing but to go come in and find out all about them old evil, man. Man, see, like, you don't even know, man. It's like you're born into this world, man. And you got it's like this, man, the dust and the wind, man. Or like the dang old candle in wind, man. It don't matter, man. It's all the oldies, old time. You know what I think, man? Like that dang old, I think, therefore you are, man.
Well, that's what we tell ourselves, isn't it, Boomhauer?
Everybody understood what he said, right? 100%. Basically, what he was saying there is that there's all these philosophies on why we're here and what we're for, and like I touched on earlier, what's your role? What's your role in the world? That's your spiritual resilience, and accepting it and knowing it and being your true self and going back to capitalizing on your strengths and the people around you. There's a spiritual board of directors. There's people that you'll put on there that, ideas that positively or negatively influence you in your view of the world. I have talked in the past about how I would put my mother on my board of directors and she'd sit at the head. And it's not necessarily for the good, but it's also for the bad, I love my mother to death, and she would throw a shoe at me if she heard me saying this, so hopefully she's not watching the stream. But she's negative. She's a very negative person. And that's just from what her experience in life was, right? Her awareness, what she sees. So she'd be at the head of mine because what I try to do is be the exact opposite. I want to be a positive person. I want to be a positive influence in people's lives. I don't want to just focus on the bad in everybody. So she would sit at the head of my board of directors. Meaning and purpose. Like I said, finding meaning and purpose in everything that's going on. Is there meaning and purpose in what happened on 9/11, 2001? I remember that day like no other. I remember the phone call I got shortly after the second plane hit the second tower. It was the scariest time of my life. In 2001, I would have been 20. So I'd been in the Army for a year and a half at that point. And the call I got scared the crap out of me because I knew what was coming after. And, from that point forward, the one thing that I'll touch on is what the mindset was of this country the day after. I hope someday we get back there because everybody looked at each other as Americans and everybody looked at each other like brothers and sisters and fellow Americans, and we've lost that. So we're going to touch on all this stuff when you're in our class. I'm just going to get going here. This is you, right? All righty.
Okay, I got it. Let's get physical. All right. Everybody please stand up. Time to work out. Sorry. Put your arms above your head. All right. And you can sit. Normally I make you suffer longer, but I won't. Have a seat. But it will give you a chance to refocus and energize a little bit. So this is your segment on physical resiliency. And I'm not up here because I'm a marathon runner. I don't do CrossFit. I'm not here because I'm a size 6, even close. I'm here because I am a board-certified family nurse practitioner. I see patients on the weekend, and I often have to talk to them about health and wellness and review their labs and give them medicine. And I see families, so that includes kids and adults. But one thing I think we could all agree on is that whether you're fire, EMS, or do police work, we see things and we have to do things that are very different than the bulk of the population, than normal folks. I think that's just undisputed, and unfortunately it's a part of what we do. One of my last ER shifts before I resigned, I was at the end of my shift and I was ready to clock out, and I was, of course, wearing scrubs. And a stay-at-home mom had come in who was doing dishes, and she broke a glass and it sliced her right across her wrist. And she was at home with her 3 or 4-year-old at the time, and she decided to drive herself in. So she comes through the ER, and I'm literally on my way out, but I see this screaming, crying child who I thought was the patient, and I just see blood everywhere. And we very quickly learned that it's the mom who got hurt. So 2 of my friends grabbed the mother, and there's blood all over the child, and the kid, of course, is attached to her like a spider monkey. And, my friends are trying to take care of the mom to stop the bleeding, and I'm on my way out the door, so I decide to grab the child. And the screams of that 3 or 4-year-old when I tried to pry them off of their mother, just blood curdling, mommy, 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 all he sees is her covered in blood. So I grab the child, and now I'm spider monkeyed, which means I'm covered in blood, which wasn't an uncommon occurrence, but I just happened to be walking out when my shift was over and helped out. So, of course, like a good ER nurse, I just found a bottle of peroxide, decided to dump it down the front of myself, right? And get in my car and clock out and go home once everyone is taken care of. So more often than not, I would get home, I would go through the garage, and I worked midnights, Friday, Saturday, Sundays, weekends. So typically my family would be asleep. So this day I go through the garage, I go to get my clothes off and put them into a bag, and opens the door to the garage, and there is my number 3 child standing there. Like, it's a bad Halloween movie, I've got blood down the front of me. So I proceed to talk to him. I don't break eye contact. I take my clothes off. I shove them into a bag, the whole 9 yards. And so no big deal. Everything was fine, other than he was probably emotionally traumatized seeing his mother. So the next week, I go to pick him up from daycare, and his teacher says, can I talk to you a minute? I said, sure. So she pulls me to the side, and she says, we have career day next week, and we were talking about our parents today in class, and Sean, in front of the whole class, said that his mommy has to take her clothes off and get in underwear because of work. So what I thought was a very benign situation and was just part of my everyday job, we had to address that and have a whole conversation about germs and stuff. Anyway, I tell you that because what we see every day, what we go through every day in our jobs, does not go for the general population. And unfortunately, that's true as well when it comes to our physical health, our diet, and all that stuff. So with regard to what determines our health, it's mostly behavioral. So our behaviors are what determine our overall health. And after behaviors, it's actually genetics. And I've had patients say, it's genetics, there's nothing I can do about it. My mom had heart disease, my dad had heart disease, there's not, the train's coming for me, there's nothing I can do about it. Well, you can. Today, if you know you have a genetic disposition for something, you can get tested early. You can take measures to try to improve your diet, get screenings, whatever it is, you can take precaution. But the bulk of our determinant for health is your behavior, all right? So with that, physical resilience, there is a connection between our physical and emotional and or mental health. There just is, we know it. Whether it's an ulcer, whether it's high blood pressure, there is a connection. And we want our officers in our resiliency program to start understanding that so that they can change those behaviors that impact their health as a majority. And we know physical resilience can help improve performance, leadership, and overall health. And look at that, all 4 tenets, all 4 domains have a direct connection to our physical resiliency. So nutritional challenges, especially when you're talking about law enforcement, we have manufactured and processed foods we pretty much all live on. Just historically, changes in the meat that we have in our diet, antibiotics, hormones, all kinds of stuff in our meat. And then we've got, of course, high fructose corn syrup as well as partially hydrogenated fats. High fructose corn syrup, is a relic of the 70s when, due to economic crisis, the U.S. relied upon corn for a sweetener instead of sugarcane that was imported from other countries. So we had corn in the U.S., and then corn was put into cornstarch, and then cornstarch became corn syrup. And then in the 50s, a bunch of scientists realized that if they threw in some enzymes and some acid in a lab, that they could create high fructose corn syrup, which gives all of our delicious foods today its incredibly high sweetness, okay? And we'll talk about the problems with high fructose corn syrup. But basically, everyone here who has grabbed a soda, a burger, a donut, whatever, that's what you're eating. And then partially hydrogenated fats obviously are part of our diet now. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
All right, so the first rule here is we keep things moving. There are two other tenets that we have not been able to get to. We had a few interruptions, obviously, throughout the process that we're not going to be able to get to with this panel. However, it will be part of what the Master Resiliency trainers will be trained on in all RPOs, and ultimately every law enforcement officer will get the final two with all the PowerPoints. You should have all received a confirming email and instructions as to how to download all the materials. All the materials and PowerPoints are available via Axway. Also, we do have people here that can download on the thumb drive all of the materials that are being presented today. Let's give this group a big round of applause. A few housekeeping announcements. Someone up in the upper level, I have your cell phone. So you may want to check to make sure it was found upstairs. So if you're up there and you're missing your cell phone, I have it. If not, we'll be actually auctioning it at the next break. And in the Delaware River Room, someone has a Bluetooth as well, lost a Bluetooth. So in fact, again, please come up here and we'll make sure that gets back to you. One other announcement, and this does not pertain to everybody, so everybody can't leave, but one person I need to move your car. One, not everybody. Specifically, it is a New Jersey registration, Victor 40GVH. It's a gray Mazda in lot 5A. You're actually, I need that car moved so someone can actually move and do something else. So one person needs to move the car, not everybody. Let's take 15 minutes, come back, and we'll go with our next panel. first time we did it together, this next CUV, I did that. I was just there, and he looks at me and said, I think I'm getting called.
That was when he was in Prosecutor?
He was my boss.
Chief, yeah. That's funny.
I was the line guy saying, yeah, you're not screwing up.
Yeah, no. Like, we need that, right?
Because unfortunately, like 5 minutes turns into another 5 minutes turns into 4 minutes.
Yep.
And the thing is, if we say 4 o'clock,
Yeah. Yep. Well, start in 9 minutes. Do you start exactly at 12? Because they gotta get
yeah, they went a little bit over. 2:30, I'm going to start making my announcements.
Okay. Do you still want me to do this? Okay. Okey-dokey. I will do that.
All right, Sarah.
How you doing?
Make sure these
Ready
guys
to
are
go?
ready.
Hi, how are you? I got my watch right here, just in case.
All right.
I watch my
Good.
time. Yeah, it's hard to see out there where everybody is, too. It's going to be fun watching everybody try to get out of here.
I know. Might as well stay till
They
like
got them parked over at the baseball stadium.
oh, and bus
Parked over
over.
there,
Like,
bus them over. Some of the late ones.
that's what they get for being late.
That's it.
Right? I mean, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I'm in no hurry. I'll wait till the crowd gets out of here.
All you chief resiliency officer, go get them.
Round them up.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's start making the way to the seats, please. The sooner you sit down, the sooner we get you out of here.
That's it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Again, we still have a missing cell phone, a missing owner to a cell phone. We also just wanted to give a big thanks to Department of Corrections. Some of you were actually bused from another area to here today to actually participate. The DOC literally came through at a moment's notice and provided busing, so let's give a big round of applause to DOC.
Okay, up next we have Families Behind the Badge. This will be a roundtable discussion on Maple Shade's Resiliency Pilot Program for Families. As I mentioned earlier, Maple Shade Police Department has for several years been an advocate for creating and implementing a resiliency program, dating back to retired Chief Gary Gubby and now Captain Christopher Fletcher, who we have here with us today. Chief Fletcher joined the Maple Shade Police Department in 1995, where he started the agency's first formal field training officers program. Fast forward to 2010, Chief Fletcher was promoted to captain and in 2014 was appointed as the Chaplain Liaison Officer, starting the agency's first ever Chaplains program. Chief Fletcher was appointed chief in 2019 and has been a true partner in building the statewide resiliency program. And also welcome back Maple Shade Detective Brian Martino, who, as you heard in the last block, was undoubtedly instrumental in bringing resiliency to New Jersey. We also have Maple Shade Chaplain Gregory Ginian joining us today. Chaplain Ginian has served as a police chaplain to Maple Shade for the last 5 years and has over 12 years' experience as a pastor. Chaplain Ginian is a certified master resiliency trainer through the FBI National Academy, as well as a trainer with the Police Chaplains Program. And we have Heather Capate, a civilian employee of the Maple Shade Police Department and member of the Records Bureau. Heather has been married to a Maple Shade police officer for 12 years. Moderating this notable panel is Reverend, President, and founder of the Police Chaplains Program of New Jersey, Gary Holden. Chaplain Holden is also the senior chaplain of the Vineland Police Department and founded the Public Schools Police Chaplain Resource Program. Chaplain Holden served as chaplain to many officers over the years, including New York City Police, Fire, and Port Authority departments following 9/11. Thank you all for being here today, and I will turn it over to our moderator, Chaplain Holden.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. So, Maple Shade, great to see you all. We're going to have a great afternoon, so just stay awake, everybody, after lunch. This is the hard thing. Actually, the last session I have, too, that's going to be the real hard one, because you're all going to want to get out of here. But this is going to be a great panel, and they have a lot of knowledge. You've already heard from Brian and all the things he has to share. And so I'm going to start out by asking Chief Fletcher a couple of questions here. And the first is, as we talk about the history, and you and I have been involved with this really pretty much from day one as far as the Resiliency program is concerned, but can you share a little of the history of how the Maple Shade Police Department arrived and the need that, as you saw it, for the Resiliency training and program?
Absolutely. Back in November 2014, I was down at Alexandria, Virginia, at the Force Science Institute's Force Certification class. And I was listening to Dr. Lewinsky talk about this concept of resiliency. When I came back to the police department, I did a couple of things. One, I recognized from that class that I was going to completely change the way we did training in our agency. And duplicately, I also wanted to address this concept of resiliency. We got some contact information. I reached out to some of the military branches, wasn't really able to make the connection. And at that point realized I had 6 active reservists within my agency, so I reached out to Detective Jeff Engel, who's here representing us today as an RBO. And Jeff worked with me, and we started reaching out to the University of Pennsylvania. University of Pennsylvania had never really considered the concept of working with the police department in this area. So we started to schedule up a series of conference calls and meetings. Pretty early on in the process, had recognized that I needed to put this comprehensive team together to build this up, because the goal always was for us, and at least for me personally, was not just to deal with the police officers, but potentially look to roll this program out to fire and EMS, and also a parallel program to deal with the families. So we came back, we put the team together. I reached out to Chaplain Holden, grabbed a couple of our chaplains, Chaplain Ginian and Chaplain McDonald. I got Detective Jeff Engel involved. Some of our union representatives were there as well. Got Brian involved, reached out to the prosecutor's office. Burlington County was quick to get involved with us, which was great. Looped in Lieutenant Wiltsey and eventually Brian Lloyd. And then we eventually reached out to the AG's office, and we got them involved. And that pulled down First Assistant now Phil Aronow and Dave Leonardis. And I have to say, Penn was, I think, really impressed with what we were putting together and what the concept was. And for us, the goal really was so important, recognizing in a post-Ferguson environment what the atmosphere was like in law enforcement at the time. Felt that this was something that was sorely needed, and I think we had the right team together to press ahead, and that's what we did.
So when we first met with the University of Penn, Chief, they shared with us what they had done with the Pentagon. And maybe you can share a little bit about what happened as far as the chaplains were concerned in the Pentagon and that whole story.
So Dr. Revich, who runs the positive psychology department, was contracted, her group was contracted by, at first, the U.S. Army. And they put this program together, and they began to roll the program out, as you heard earlier, to address conditions for soldiers, especially suicide, substance abuse issues. And during that time, they had not included the chaplains. And a lot of the soldiers were going to the chaplains talking about a lot of these concepts, and it was pretty clear that they recognized that we got to loop the chaplains in because it was a missing component. Thankfully for us, we had done that from the very get-go, because I knew in my mind when I'm running this parallel program, I wanted to have the chaplains involved with the union taking care of the families. So that's how we're able to piece that together.
And that's one of the reasons why now chaplains are in the loop on this whole thing, really, because it started back then.
Absolutely.
Can you also share about your thoughts about this not just being for the officers, but being for their families as well?
Sure. Like in my mind, everybody here is well aware of what the atmosphere is like if you've been in the job. I've been in the job for 24 years. And, post-Ferguson, Baltimore, New York City, what things were like. You're going home, you're kind of sharing things with your spouse. And it kind of hit me as I'm going through all these things and making all these changes within the agency, and thankfully having a rank that allowed me to position to affect the changes that I wanted to make. I recognize that, what are we doing for our spouses, our significant others? And being a department that's in transition right now and having so many young officers, we recognize the need that we also had to pull in their family and potentially parents. And I'll have Greg talk a little bit about that more later. But they were some key components. And we felt if we could start tackling these issues, we weren't sure how this was going to go. And Heather will be able to jump in and talk about it from her perspective. But the result that we got was absolutely overwhelming.
So let's go to Chaplain Ginian next, and maybe you can build on that. The chaplains, as far as the families are concerned, you're one of the instructors in the program. Share from your perspective. Then I'm going to go to Heather and have her share from her perspective as well.
Sure. As chaplain, I realize that my role is unique in the fact that I'm not, part of the department as far as employee. I'm not there every day. I'm there in a support role. And then my work in my church, in my clergy role, I work with, parents, families, marital conflict all the time. So I thought my position was actually ideal to kind of be a bridge between the department and the families. So Detective Martino and myself were tasked with rolling out this training and presenting it to, at first we thought it was just going to be the spouses or significant others of the officers in our department. But then we quickly realized that a lot of our officers were still fairly young, still living at home. And their parents were their significant others, so to speak, in the sense that they're the ones that, had to deal with their son or their daughter when they came home from work and had this, cumulative trauma and the hypervigilancy, and they wanted to know how that they could best support their loved ones. So we said, well, yeah, absolutely. We'd love to have you guys involved. So we set up our first dinner, and the union got involved, and we decided to have a meal and invite everyone out to a meal, and then present, instead of doing it more formal, in a very informal way, present this training in a way that could be received and hopefully implemented right away. And at the same time, Detective Martino had begun doing the resiliency modules one or two at a time with all the officers in the department. So we figured the spouses and significant others and family members would have a chance to talk about the concepts that they were both working on simultaneously. So we thought it was a real good fit, and I think our first attempt to do this, we had over 40 people come out and respond, and I thought they really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I was at that dinner that night, and it was just unbelievable how everybody shared, the relatives shared, parents, they were parents. That's some of the things we forget about. We think of spouses, but many of the officers are not married. They have parents. They have other relatives. So many of them were involved in that, and it was very exciting to see the enthusiasm for that night.
Correct. Yeah. Yes, I was concerned that they might be hesitant to share, be involved, and Heather can attest to that because she's always willing to share very freely. And she kind of got the ball rolling, but within a short amount of time, I thought everybody was comfortable, and it seemed like something that they were really looking forward to talking about. So it was a very easy night, and actually it was harder to get people to stop talking so we could move on to the next section than it was to get them to start talking.
So Heather, you're a civilian employee, but your husband is also a police officer.
Yes.
So I remember you shared that night. It was really fantastic, some of the things you shared. So share from your perspective, being on both sides, I guess, to an extent.
Sure. So being a civilian employee, especially with the resiliency training, I kind of feel that, like, in the beginning, we were kind of put on the back burner, and it's taken a total turn. The fact that, we see ourselves sometimes as, the face of the department. When you have somebody that's coming in that's angry, or somebody who, got in an accident, and, we're the first people that they see, and they're taking the brunt of their emotions out on us. When we decided, or when they started the resiliency training for the families, we also incorporated the civilian staff for our department in that training, and it was surprisingly very receptive. I've been there for 11 years, and the other 3 women that I work with have been there for 20 plus years. And people are set in their ways sometimes, and they were very receptive to it. And being that it's now this kind of environment in today's society not only affects the officers, it does affect the civilian employees. And being that I am a spouse of a police officer, and that I work in the department, and I kind of have a twofold perspective on what really goes on. I know what goes on as far as, the day-to-day workings of being, a police officer and working in a police department, but I also know what it's like to come home to, a husband, and, myself included, who may not have the best day at work, and, may not know how to communicate with their spouses. And that's one thing that I think, I've been able to relay. One of our female officers, who's also our school resource officer, and I, about 6 years ago, started a family group for the spouses at the time. And now we've incorporated the parents and, siblings of some of the younger officers that we have, where we try to, get everybody together, several times a year, just to sit down and talk and, discuss, how things are going on in their lives. And it may sound cheesy, like when you were a kid and you used to have circle time in like first grade. Well, we have circle time, and we sit in a group amongst our, amongst the wives and amongst the parents, and we go around and, we talk about, what might be bothering us, and ways that, we can, alleviate, like if you're having an issue with your husband because, they're not communicating with you. And this is why I think the resiliency for the spouses and for the families has really made the communication between our officers, their families, and their spouses. It's a different world in our department, and it's a different world when you talk to the other spouses, and you can see the what used to seem like struggles for them is now a little bit there's a lot less tension, and there's a lot more communication. And that's like the biggest thing I think that we can put out there is talk to your spouse, talk to your wife, ask questions, and I can tell when my husband has a bad day, and I know when I should push for more information or not. But just talk. Even if you don't talk about work, you might not want to come home and talk to your wife because you had a bad day, or they may not want to come home and talk to you because they had a bad day at work. And whether your wife, husband, mom, dad works, or they're staying home with their kids all day. I have 2 kids. I work full time, and I know how stressful it is to have children and come home and have to have a conversation with your husband. But just find that opportunity to communicate, just to keep that avenue open.
So I think everybody understands now this is for everyone in the department, not just police officers, not just family members of police officers, but for civilian staff, dispatchers, whatever you might have in your department. So you have seen that work then, not just with the officers and their families, but how many civilian employees would you have in Maple Shade?
4.
Yeah,
there's 4.
We have 4 in our records division, and like Heather's elaborating on now, like for us, the decision was, do we include the civilians as a separate group? Because when we train this up, and Brian can cover this, but when we train up by each platoon or patrol shift. We train up by detectives. We train up by admin. But we had, in discussion with the civilians, included them with the spouses, and that seemed to be a good fit. I think you could do the civilian staff individually if you chose, with everybody else in the station. But it's a nice social component because it really does help tie everything together, and I think that's been a big success. Mm-hmm. But I think there is some flexibility in what people decide to do.
Okay, so we've heard from Detective Martino, so we're not going to ask you any questions. No, that's not true.
Thank God.
Detective Martino, now you're in the Army, and you were one of the trainers, so going all the way back into this program. Can you tell us a little bit of the differences, but similarities between what we're doing now, we're carrying this over into law enforcement,
Sure.
and what you had in the military?
Sure. So one thing is that if I ever mention anything in the UPenn model, I'd probably be sued because it's copywritten, and I've run it now. It's actually very similar in what we present through the military. A lot of the domains and tenets are called something else. They're lessons instead of, there's a whole thing. But all the message behind it is all the same. The only difference is some verbiage. I've been a Master Resiliency Trainer, level 1, we'll say, for I think 3 years at this point. I went to level 2 as a surprise, but that just basically gave me the ability to go to different bases and train level 1s. But that is the only reason why I'm sitting here. I feel like, Chief Fletcher knew at the time that I was getting ready to go, and he thought that it would be beneficial for me to meet with Dr. Rivich, who created the program, and kind of talk about it. So I'm grateful to be here. But there's a lot of similarities. The Army started it obviously because of the op tempo in the 2006 to 2009 frame. I wasn't introduced to the MRT model until I came back from Iraq. I was in Ramadi from 2009 to 2010. And that's when the Army started kicking it out a lot more, but it affected me personally in about 2012, 2013 when I was in the police academy. My wife's sister was killed by a drunk driver in a car crash, and she had a really tough time dealing with it, which then caused a lot of turmoil. And I had a really good instructor through MRT who I drank the Kool-Aid. And I really wanted to be a part of that program, and I went, and that's why I'm here.
So as an RPO, and now you're really the first RPO technically, right, in the pilot program in Maple Shades, what are some of your observations now that you've started to do this now with the officers and their families?
Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of you would know that it's kind of difficult talking to some people who've been in this job for 20 plus years in a fixed mindset. The first session was forced, and it was a little difficult to get through, but every lesson since, the walls have come down. Like Chief was saying, we split it up into platoon levels, so we have a patrol shift, 2 days, 2 nights. The day shift for one would do their hour together. The night shift for that same day would do it an hour, and then the opposite day would come in and they would do their hour as well. The DB does it together, and the administrative staff does it together. And the reason for that is the team building that is incorporated in the practical exercises and the conversations that get started and the bonds that you'll build. Lesson 7 was brushed upon here, the character strengths, but the biggest, most powerful lesson that I covered in a practical exercise was that. Just having people stand there and tell each other what they thought their character strengths were and why. You could see, a sergeant who was 20 years on listening to people tell him why they appreciate him and what they think and why he had these character strengths. He teared up. It's something that's going to affect you one way or another, and it's just a really great program.
So 2 other things along with that. The practical exercise, and we do the teaching, you use the PowerPoint, you get them involved like we saw today, and of course much more than that when you're doing the whole training. But what other practical exercises are you utilizing with those you're training?
So with the FBI's program, they do incorporate practical exercises and group exercises as well. What I've spoken with Chief Fletcher about at this point is for year 2, year 3, year 5, year 6, you're not going to just sit up there and push buttons and say this is the presentation. What I want to do is follow up on, say, when they're set a goal, who actually accomplished those goals. Let's talk about how you did it. Sitting down with people in each month and going over the practical exercises, and again seeing how they're incorporating them into their lives, talking about how the character strengths, how they're using them now that they know, build the self-awareness and self-regulation parts into it and see what they've learned about themselves and share those experiences inside the groups.
So you're utilizing small groups as well, right? Not just the big class, but
yep. So
how does that work?
So it's the same. So
how many in a group?
So we have 6 to 7 per shift, roughly, on a good day if they're not injured or anything like that. But so each group would have about 6 or 7. The prime amount that you want to stay under is under 25. If you're going to do the small groups, break them down into, like say, groups of 5 is probably the best. So that way they can spit off of each other and share each other's experiences.
Okay. Chief, Burlington County, you're very involved in the process there. You have a Chaplains Association in Burlington County, and there have been suicides, as we've talked about this morning. Can you just share a little bit from your perspective on what's going on with the county and things that you noticed there?
Sure. So,
from a county perspective.
During this time, Burlington County was kind of a de facto hotbed for first responder suicides. We had a number of them taking place. Obviously, it was disturbing to a lot of the first responders across the board, and we knew that we were building this program, and we really couldn't build the program fast enough to try to account for some of the stuff that we were seeing. When we were looking at this family piece and dealing with that as well, when I started the Chaplain Corps back in 2014, we started meeting. 15, we go live. I also created a nonprofit to fund their activities. And we recognized as we were building this up that when we partnered the chaplains with the PBA, we're PBA where we're at on the union side, but we partnered them up together so the nonprofit was going to pick up the tab for that first meal that we were going to share together. And the union jumped in and said, you know what, let's share the cost. So actually tonight we're going to be hosting lessons 5 and 6. As soon as we're done, we're racing home to get set up for that meeting. But, you know, we're catering in from a local restaurant, and it's a great chance for everybody to come together. And in terms of the chaplains, Greg's our designated chaplain representative. Brian's our designated representative from the police department and also from the union to team up and provide this training. In addition to that, and within the county, when we were putting our chaplain program together, my vision was a larger one for the county that I wanted to be able to kind of start centralizing and organizing the chaplains, knowing that all this is happening behind the scenes and knowing where things were potentially going to go. So we got a lot of chaplains in Burlington County to start coming out to the meetings. We were able to establish an association, elect an executive board. I could back myself out at that point. The chaplains at that point would begin to run that organization, and then we linked them up with the prosecutor's office, Prosecutor Kafina, First Assistant Prosecutor Phil Aronow, and Phil's kind of been the liaison to that group. And that's been instrumental because now they're all talking about how can we get involved in putting these family programs together within these agencies once this training gets rolled out. So again, on the chaplain side, they're excited, they want to get involved, and you know, I encourage on the union side to think about doing this. I know that there was concerns through discussions that, you know, is it some kind of a trick? You know, what's going to happen if the officers start to divulge stuff? And you've heard this morning, I think, some very on-point comments, very important comments that we're trying to change and have a paradigm shift here on what's happening. So I think now, knowing that everything is moving the way that it is, I'm thankful to the Attorney General and obviously to Director Allende, Prosecutor Kafina, that everybody has jumped in to support this effort. But I will say that I think Cherie, I believe it might have been at last year's chaplain conference, had said the missing component to what is happening is your families at home. And I think that resonated with everybody who was sitting there. The chaplains had looked at me and I said, see, I know we're moving in the right direction. It was an important step, and I think it's a step that we're going to continue to develop.
So both you and Detective Martino, can you share a little bit about the importance of the leadership buying in on this? You know, the whole resiliency program, every aspect of it, the importance of really getting behind it. Now they're here today, many of them, but just share from your perspective on that.
Well, so for me, I got lucky The leadership is the ones that created the idea, right? So they're already on board. I know in the military it took a little bit of convincing for my colonel. I was in a brigade when I began, but I think for the police-wise, the one thing that I benefited from was that Chief Fletcher is so involved. He leads from the front, and he wants that change, and he wants to see the betterment of his people, whether they're police officers, civilians, or their family. I mean, I think that's the biggest component. The Army lacked in that for a very long time with bringing the families in. I remember the one time that we had a family day. They wanted to do a resiliency training for the family, and it was a joke. It was hunt the good stuff, and it just wasn't good. So I think for me, the buy-in from the guy who sits in the leadership chair, leading from the front, is super important.
Yeah, I think, at least from our perspective, I still remember sitting down with Prosecutor Kafina when we had that initial meeting, and we were making this pitch to him. And, the way I was explaining it is, resiliency is in front of the early warning system. That's how we viewed it. Like, before we get to the early warning system, if we're checking off boxes to the early warning system, in our collective opinion up here, we've already missed some marks. So let's back that up. Let's address these issues now. And that's what we started doing. And to have that paradigm shift within the organization, to know that officers, if they are struggling with something, as an administrator, I'd rather know as early in that process as possible to get them the help that they need, and then potentially support their families if need be, and that's where the chaplains come in. They can jump in and provide that spousal support if necessary, and we try to work as a team to address an issue. Brian was the union vice president when we started this. He's the president of the union now. We're fortunate to have a good relationship within our organization, but it was critically important that as a team, and we were looking where things were going to go, we both recognize we share the same interests. He's trying to represent his members' rights and ensure that the work environment is positive and productive. And I want the same thing as the chief, and I want to make sure that everybody's out there doing the right thing. Our motto in the department is do the right thing each time, every time, even when nobody's watching. And, we subscribe to that across the board, and that's what we try to push out to everybody.
And Heather, you're also the liaison, right, between the PBA and the spouses. Can you share a little bit about that?
I wear several hats between, being the spouse and being a civilian and, working alongside the PBA and, just trying to come up with, different ways to get, our families along with the PBA and the department to do, stuff together as a family, because, when you look at it, we are a big family, whether you're working there or you're married to a cop. We try to, emphasize the fact that we are a family. Just to give you an example, we have a sidewalk sale in Maple Shade every year that draws thousands of people, and the PBA sells T-shirts every year for charity. They pick a charity every year. This year they did Mission 22, and the PBA, I should say, buys about...
You can say we. It's fine.
Thank you. About 400 to 500 T-shirts that come in a box, and they need to be folded. And I've seen it where guys come in off of their, on their free time down in our, cafeteria area and fold it, or sometimes us ladies in records get, boxes jumped on us to fold at the last minute. But we decided this year I wanted to make a little bit of fun, so I invited, whoever was available, cops, families, the wives, the mothers, fathers, and even some of the kids over to my house, and we had a T-shirt folding party. And we had appetizers, and we had adult beverages, and we have a pool, so my kids and all the kids who were there were swimming in the pool, and, we kind of turned it into, a family fun event, something to make, connect, because sometimes, you find like the department itself and the PBA, they kind of are almost at a disconnect because, you figure it's the union, but we're just trying to, do what we can to incorporate it as a whole to make it one big, happy family.
Yeah, good.
Can I just jump in?
Yes, please.
So one of the things I just wanted to point out to everybody is if you're contemplating going down this path, just some things I just want to point out to you that we didn't really consider some of these things that kind of popped up, but it's important that you consider them ahead of time. So one of the things that we were discussing was where were we going to hold this first event for the families. So we decided on a restaurant in town that they had this side meeting room, and we could expand it into an additional room if we needed to, which we did. And it was a BYOB. We never had any discussion about whether people could bring alcohol or not. And so we had, spouses showing up with maybe a bottle of wine. And, it was just something that probably allowed people to loosen up a little bit and share a little bit more. But it was something we had never even thought about or discussed. So
the attendees, not the presenters.
So when we made the move for the second meeting, we said, we wanted a little bit more privacy than the restaurant afforded us. So that's one thing I will tell you to be considerate about, that spouses sharing things, be aware of your surroundings, because there's a lot of people up there with cell phones and things of that nature, so privacy is going to be important. So we ended up shifting to one of the houses of worship, but when you do that, generally there's not going to be any alcohol permitted. So we saw kind of a dip in the attendance at that point, and but I will qualify that. So we recognized the time of the year, unfortunately, was bad for anybody who's coaching, like a lot of us do. It was at the end of the school year. We got all that rain. All the playoffs were pushed off. We had graduations going on at multiple schools. Some of that stuff got pushed off. And unfortunately, it all overlapped over top of this second session. So tonight, we're going to be going to our independent fire company, and that is BYOB if you choose. And we're going to be hosting the meeting there. So we're curious to see where we're at on the attendance. I think we'll probably pull about maybe 30 plus people tonight, which is a great number. We're very happy with that number. But that's some of the stuff that you need to think about if you're going to do this. Cops are very specific about putting their family members out there in the public eye. I don't do it. There's one time that I do it. It's National Night Out. National Night Out, we bring the families up, and we bring the families out into the public view. But generally speaking, we don't put the families in the public view. So if you're going to do this, and there can be some emotion that's exchanged, there could
Absolutely.
be...
Especially when Heather's there. Makes the whole room cry.
It is things that you need to be considerate of, and it is things you need to be protected of.
So when they have the spouses meeting or the relatives meeting, do you as a chief attend those?
I don't. I have purposely kept myself out of that aspect other than coordinating. Like today, we just found out our caterer's got a employee problem, so I'm going to go grab the food tonight before the council meeting and run it over and drop it off, so we have that there for them to do what they need to do. But I set it up specifically that it would be a partnership between the chaplains and the union. Our chaplains are very active. When they first started out, I kind of was at a lot of the stuff just to get everybody used to being around the chaplains, but once we did our active shooter scenario training a time or two, then it was like officers start cursing in front of the chaplains. You've been accepted. They know that you're part of the team now. They don't have any concerns, and they've been just embraced. So for our group now, chaplains just communicate directly with them. One of the things that we set up was a good and welfare fund. Anytime an officer's out, surgery, could be a newborn baby. We've partnered with the union. We used a nonprofit. They make a donation. We deliver gift cards. Just things to try to build that sense of family within the organization.
And as one of those people who was a recipient of that when my mom passed away last year, it does kind of sweep you off your feet when you're not expecting it and somebody shows up at your house with a gift card and some edible arrangements.
All right. Anything else that anybody wants to share before we wrap this session up? Go ahead, Heather.
This has actually been something new this week that we, not as on a resiliency side, kind of incorporating it with our children. One of our officers had reached out to me and several of the other moms in our group because, when I first started, my son was born 2 weeks after I started at the department. So he was a baby, and he's 11 years old now, and we have a lot of, kids who have grown up, in the department, and who, like my daughter and Brian's daughter Frankie are friends, and they, now that they're getting older, they are more aware of what's going on in society, listening to the news, listening to their friends, and just hearing what's going on in our lives. My husband and I are not the kind of people that like to sugarcoat things for our kids, so we are very honest with them. And Officer Misty Weiss was able to, along with the support of the PBA, on Tuesday get Dr. Fran Roberts, who is a clinical psychologist, to come out and speak to the children in our department. And we had 7 kids, and my son was one of them in attendance. And I unfortunately was not able to attend, but I was a little nervous about how he was going to interpret it, being an 11-year-old boy. And the feedback that we got from them was overwhelming. They loved it. They want to do it again. And I know that we're planning on having her come speak to the families and the wives and the parents of our employees and of our officers. And it's you think about the families, and we're having these resiliency meetings for wives and husbands and moms and dads, but I think really something to take into consideration when you're putting in these programs, especially if you have older kids, teenagers, kids who are just starting to learn about not to be crass, what a shitty society we live in. That we need to teach them resilience, because if you start them young, at a young age, they'll be able to cope better as they become adults.
Okay. Anybody else before we wrap it up?
I'm just going to say thank you to Rob Zepiel. Rob's been the guy behind the scenes, the liaison to everything that we've been doing here. Rob has been the driving force to get this where it needed to be, and also Bill Mazur from Acadia Health. If it wasn't for Chief Gubby meeting with Bill and making that jump from how do we transition this out to all you folks, that connection helped make all this happen. So I just want to recognize those 2 individuals as critically important for that to happen, and I think it has really taken this thing to the next level where it needed to be. And I wish everybody good luck with your agencies. If you need anything at all from Maple Shade, please don't hesitate to give us a call. Jeff Engel's going to get trained up. He'll be part of our team. But between Brian, myself, Greg, Heather, we're happy to help anybody who needs any assistance.
Absolutely.
Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, guys. We're going to move right into the next session, folks. We're going to get you out of here. This won't be long, even though I'm a preacher. I got to get my thing. Just this. Lauren's going to come up, right? There she is. We're going to go down.
Okay, so we made it. We're at the last block of the day, which is the role of the Police Chaplains Program in the NJRP. Let's welcome back Chaplain Gary Holden, and with him is Lauren Ira, who is the Deputy Attorney General in the Prosecutor Supervision and Training Bureau, and she is also the chaplain to the Division of Criminal Justice. Lauren was also a sex crimes prosecutor in Philly, so that takes resiliency. Let's get started.
Thank you. So we're very excited about having Lauren here now as chaplain for the Attorney General's office. She's been through our training. She's getting mic'd up right now. So I'm just going to run through a few things. We have a table over here on the side. You've probably seen it already with a lot of information there. If you do not have a chaplain program in your department, please see us about that. We do have some trainings coming up. You can sponsor a training as well. But we just want to run through an overview of this right now, if we can. If I can get that clicker to work. We got it plugged in over there? Is it turned on here? That wasn't plugged in. Got to plug it in, folks. The laser's working. There we go. Back up. Okay. So a new thing that we're doing in the police chaplain program is we're now working with the Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections already has chaplains for the inmates, but they have not had them for the officers. Over 8,000 corrections officers, plus the civilian staff and all the other staff members. So we are now getting ready to launch this program. We're doing it in 2 or 3 locations. eventually into every prison in the state of New Jersey. And we already have 60 chaplains signed up to work with the Department of Corrections. I'm the first one to be able to do that. I'll be working with Southwoods on that myself. But we work with all different agencies, but we focus now, of course, on this one. Remember this guy? He was just at Congress just recently, at 9/11. Notice what he said. We were told the air was safe down there, and it wasn't. But you know what? That doesn't matter, because we would have went in anyway, because that's what we do. It's not a job, it's a calling. We believe firmly that what you do as officers and staff, it's not just a job, it's a calling. And there are a lot of aspects of that, is there not? We believe the same with chaplains, that this is a calling. Not every clergy person wants to or can be a police chaplain or a chaplain. It takes people that are really willing to do some things above and beyond the call of duty in many ways, just like you do things above and beyond the call of duty. After he testified at Congress about 2 weeks later, he's gone because of breathing the air. I served at the World Trade Center, and I'm going through some health issues myself right now. 3 of our chaplains that I served with there are now gone because of breathing the air on 9/11. But we do it because it's a calling. And there are many chaplains here with us today. We'll be here tomorrow. There are many, many more. We have trained over 1,200 here in the state of New Jersey, and ongoing many more are coming, some trainings coming up. And we believe this is a calling. We do it not because we're paid to do it. It's a volunteer thing. And we do it because we believe that we are called to do it. So this is on the Department of Homeland Security, the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. This is what it says. The Police Chaplain Program is a partner to the New Jersey Office of the Attorney General, as well as many state agencies in New Jersey. And the Chaplain Program trains clergy to be police chaplains assisting law enforcement in a myriad of different functions. Their efforts help build public trust, bring the community and law enforcement to a more cohesive working relationship. It's a partnership. And we believe that if we're helping the officers, we're helping the community. And if we're helping the community, we're helping the officers. So it's an important element of this whole thing as far as working together. You saw this one this morning, although that's a firefighter there, so it can be any, and we work with all different kinds of first responders. So here's our primary purpose: to provide support and encouragement to law enforcement officers, agency personnel, and their families. So we always tell in our 2-day basic training all those that are coming to be chaplains that we're there first and foremost for the officers and their families. And the Resilience program just moves right into that very nicely. It works very nicely together. And as Chaplain Ginian mentioned, that they've been already doing this kind of thing with families, and we want to just continue to do that. It's always been a little more difficult to meet the families, to be where the families are. We're out with the officers, we ride with the officers, we're around in the department, we get the calls, but not always so much with the family. But we believe it's very important that we're there for everybody. And then the secondary purpose is to provide support, comfort, and assistance to the community. We know much of the community is in crisis in many different ways. So we train our chaplains on how to do death notifications. I've done over 50 death notifications myself, and it never gets any easier. It's not easy for the officer. It's not easy for the chaplain or anybody that has to go out. And we go together, and then the chaplain stays with that family. But we're there for the community. We do all kinds of things, as you can see. And again, that's all part of our training, the 10 courses that I'll talk to you about in just a moment. That's called the 1,000-yard stare. I actually have the photograph from World War II of an Army soldier, actual picture from that. And that's called the 1,000-yard stare. Then somebody sketched this pertaining to law enforcement. You can see all the things that we've been talking about this morning, and you've heard about this morning. All the things and so many other things that can affect officers. And so the Resilience program is designed to be alert to this, to be aware of these things, and to know when there are officers that are going through. Hopefully, the Resilience program will start to nip that so we don't get ever to that point of there being that 1,000-yard stare. I'm going to have Lauren come right now. And Lauren's been through our chaplain training. We appreciate her very much, and working now with the Attorney General's office, and it's that one right there.
Okay, thank you.
I think the battery's getting a little low in it.
Okay, I'll do what I can to keep up. But so even when we were thinking about the previous slide, right, about the 1,000-yard stare, it's just also thinking about where are we, right? Because when you looked at the person in the picture, it's also kind of conceptualizing where are you right now? Where are you when you go home? Where are you when you're in the midst of a situation? Where are you when you're processing your thoughts, when you're going from job to job, situation to situation, where you may have one kind of a call, right? You may have like a DV call. The way you respond to a DV call is not the same way that you respond to a robbery, right? Or robbery in progress. Because your mind is moving in different kinds of ways, right? Trying to de-escalate versus attack or address the threat, right? So kind of thinking about that 1,000-yard stare is also thinking about where are we? Are we at that previous call? Are we at the current call? And what kind of process did we have in between those two jobs, right? Because it happened so fast. And so in so saying and happening so fast, a lot of times things are very fine line between calm and chaos, right? And the purpose of a chaplain, the goal of a chaplain, the effort of the chaplain would be to be a good listener, right? A neutral source, one that's not going to repeat anything that you say. And furthermore, it's a thin line between calm and chaos. And our goal would be to get you more towards calm because we know it's a constant flux between calm, chaos, from job to job, circumstance to circumstance, situation to situation. But how can we keep and how can we encourage you? How can we help you navigate through that fine line between calm and chaos? And so we have three primary stresses that have been identified by the National Police Suicide Foundation. First of which are stresses on the street. Second of which are stresses within the department. And third are stresses within the family. And certainly those aren't listed in the order of priority, right? And so you have stresses on the street, as I just indicated, of going from situation to situation. As Sarah Quigley mentioned, Deputy Attorney General Sarah Quigley mentioned that I was a Philadelphia district attorney for quite some time, and my jobs were jury trials of domestic violence cases, rape, crimes against children, sexual assault against children. So the constant things that I was hearing about were kids telling me about they were getting raped, right? And they would often be getting raped by people who were really close to them. So kind of processing even that vicarious trauma in the sense of listening to children tell me all day long, or trying to talk to that woman, not to say a woman, because it could be anybody, but in my scenarios, most of them were speaking to women who are victims of domestic violence, telling me how, okay, this is the last time. No, for real. This is really the last time. I'm not going to go back. And then we have yet another case, another court date where this is like the 5th or 6th or 7th time. And so that's part of what my passion is. And those are some of the stresses that I saw from my officers and them having to respond to those kinds of cases, right? Them having to respond to children, them showing up on the scene and kids telling them all types of stuff, or adults or anyone, right? Knowing that those are the types of stressors. Stresses within the department, right? Trying to keep up with your colleagues, trying to continue to perform. You're dealing with so much on your shoulders, but your shoulders are only intended to take but so much. Stresses within the family. I mean, do we really, this like that kind of speaks for itself, right? So all day long you've had to navigate through what you had to navigate through. All day long you've had to be the leader, you've had to be the authority, you've had to be in charge. By the time you go home, it's like, you know what, I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk. I don't want to chat. Like, I just want to go somewhere and put my feet up. But it's like that person in the 1,000-yard stare, right? That it's like, you can't just box somebody out and then say, hey, I don't want to talk about it, because they're like, well, why don't you want to talk? And then it turns into its own little thing. So that produces its own kind of stresses within the family. And so the role of a chaplain, the goal and the purpose would be to listen. I think one of the greatest things that someone can do is just be quiet and listen. Just listen. Be a neutral source. Be a neutral person that's not going to repeat anything you say, because we have absolutely no reason why we would. So chaplains are helping to rescue the rescuer, right? You guys are always the people that are in the forefront of authority. You're in the forefront of taking control of situations, taking control of the matter, taking control and neutralizing things and de-escalating, right? But it's our way of trying to be a resource and to be a place that you can vent and vent without any judgment and help encourage to strengthen and rescue the rescuer. So what are the needs for chaplains, right? Because you might say to yourself, well, I think I know what a chaplain is, but like, can't I just go to church or my house of worship or my various place? But it's not even intended to be some kind of necessarily religious backdrop, and Chaplain Holden certainly can continue to articulate on that when he gets to some of the next slides. But it's to relieve stress for officers, and it's a neutral place. To build rapport with officers. Some chaplains do ride-alongs, and that continues to help strengthen relationships. So while you're trying to deal with maybe a threat, maybe they were talking to the victim or the victim's family, trying to, do whatever it is that you say is okay to do. Offer friendship to officers, most importantly being a listening ear without judgment or criticism. Chaplain Holden has often titled this the ministry of presence. Sometimes just being present is more than enough. Work alongside officers at scenes in order to help free officers to do your actual police work. So I'll turn it over to Chaplain Holden for the next couple.
So this is why we believe, one chaplain can't do all this stuff. If you only have one chaplain, it's not going to work. And that's why when we first started this program, we promoted the idea of having a chaplain corps or a chaplain team. The more chaplains, the better, as far as we're concerned, because you can always use chaplains at different situations. And so we can talk to you more about how to utilize that. We have a lot of information on that. But one of the things we emphasize heavily is that you can talk to a chaplain and it'll be confidential within the parameters that are necessary. But for the most part, it's confidential. And so you never have to worry about that. We have a whole class on this with our chaplains, the importance of this. But they're clergy. They already understand that anyways. And so you can always talk to the RPO. You can talk to an RPO from another department. You can talk to somebody in the EAP program. You can talk to cop, have somebody talk to cop, or you can talk to a chaplain. And it's confidential. And so that's very important, I think. But a lot of times officers don't really begin to do that until that relationship is built by the chaplains with the officers. That's why we say it takes 2 to 5 years to build a chaplain program, because that trust has to happen, that buy-in has to happen. But it does happen. The first year, good things are going to happen. The next year, more things, and so on. And confidentiality is a big part of that. And then availability. That's why a chaplain team is necessary. So chaplains are on call. I always knew that if my phone rang after midnight, it was probably my city calling. It would come up on caller ID that I was needed for a call of some sort or another. So we're available. But first and foremost, as I mentioned, we're available for the officers and their families. We want to be there for them first. That's the most important thing. But again, if we're helping the community, we're helping law enforcement. If we're helping law enforcement to do their job more effectively, we're helping the community. So the two things go very nicely together. So I just want to talk about, we're going to finish up here in just a moment. I just want to talk about our training program. And there are brochures on that in the back. We have a couple trainings coming up. We have one actually right here in Trenton next month. We have another one in Vineland coming up at the end of this month, and some others that'll be coming. We're of New Jersey, but we're all over the country now. We just booked Northern California. We're going to be in New Hampshire. We've been all over the East Coast. And so we go out. And this is primarily what we do is training. Because as officers and departments, training is vital. Well, training is vital for chaplains. It's very important that chaplains are trained effectively. So let me just share with you a little bit about what we cover in 2 days. 2 days we go from 8:30 to 4:30 both days. And we cover introduction to law enforcement chaplaincy. What is a chaplain? We talk about what a chaplain does. We talk about ride-alongs. And then we have a whole class on the law enforcement family, their family members. How do we build those bridges to be able to work together with families? And National Night Out is a great way to do this. Coffee with the Cop. Include your chaplains in that. Get your chaplains involved with that when family members come out for things as well. But we build on that with a whole class in that. And what affects the family? How law enforcement and what you go through affects the family members. We talk about that. And then we have a whole class on domestic violence. And of course, every department has to deal with domestic violence calls. But there's also domestic violence within the law enforcement community. And we talk about that as well. And how do we deal with that? And how do chaplains help with that to bring that level of tension down? Again, helping the family. And then we have a class on managing stress, and we talk about how to manage critical incident stress, what we call critical stress management. We get into PTSD on that, but this is a very basic class. So beyond that, we have other 2-day trainings in crisis intervention through the International Critical and Stress Foundation. And we do those trainings as well. We also have a 1-day advanced training course that we do. So training is vital, but the basic training is the key to all of this. And then we talk about officer injury, death, and ceremonies that chaplains may be involved with. Nobody ever wants to have a line of duty death in their department. Nobody ever wants to have a suicide in their department, or even a natural death that might occur with an officer. But it does happen. And chaplains are trained on how to deal with that. Even a canine, even when a dog is killed in the line of duty, or a dog has to be put to sleep, that's devastating on that police officer and his family. And so the chaplains are trained how to be there for them in all these situations. And then we talk about ethics and confidentiality. And again, death notifications. We actually run right through how to do death notifications. We teach our chaplains exactly how to do it, all the way from the beginning to the end. In fact, our course on death notification is now being used pretty heavily in the state of Connecticut with all the police officers in the state of Connecticut, because they say this is the most thorough class on death notification we have ever seen. So we utilize it there. But we train our chaplains how to go out with an officer, what to say, how to say it, and then to be there for the family when all is said and done. The officer can leave, get back to his job, and the chaplain can stay as long as necessary to be there with that family to help them through the process, and sometimes ongoing. Sometimes even the family will reach out to us a few days later and say, you were a big help to me, can you officiate my loved one's funeral? And of course, we're trained to do that as well as clergy. So we wear two different hats, or many different hats in that regard. But death notification training is very important. Then we have a whole class on suicide awareness. Even though it's an hour and a half class, we cover a lot of things in that time. We talk about the myths of suicide. We share a lot of videos in that class. And I got an email from one of our chaplains after we did one of the classes last spring. And she called home because there was an officer friend of her husband's and hers that she was concerned about in North Jersey. And so she called him. She said, I'm concerned about you. He said, boy, am I glad you called, because I was going to take my life tonight. And this has happened more often than you realize with us. And so she called her husband. She was in Atlantic County for the training, and she called her husband. He went over, was able to get him down to the station. They got his guns removed, and she wrote me an email, and she says, the training has saved another New Jersey police officer's life. And I said, if that's the only reason we do this, it's the best thing we can do. If that's the only time we ever hear that, and we've heard it other times before. So you see, it's very important, this training that we have. And then we end our training with what we call unity in the midst of diversity. And the beauty of what we do with chaplains is we want all cultures, we want all religions to be chaplains. We've trained about every kind of religious chaplain you can think of. And we want that. Of course, it's those who are willing to serve and are able to serve. But we talk about how chaplains set the pace in this area. And we hear so much about disunity in our community. We want to promote unity. And even to help diffuse situations where there are. I was on the ground for a whole week in Ferguson. I was in Baltimore within hours. I actually was there with the New Jersey State Police as a New Jersey State Police chaplain. I was in the streets for a number of days talking to all kinds of people, trying to help bring that tension level down. And when we work together on this, it really is a beautiful picture. So we talk about unity in the midst of diversity. We all come from different backgrounds and cultures and religions, but as chaplains, we can bring people together and we can help bridge that gap. So these are the 10 things we cover in the 2 days that we do the training, and everybody gets a certificate that they complete the basic training. We always tell them, it doesn't certify you to be a chaplain. People call me up and say, now if we take your training, you're certifying us to be a chaplain. I said, no. You have to go through your police department. There's going to be the background checks and the application process and all of that. Then your police department's going to certify you to be a chaplain. But this training is vital. It's vitally important, you see, along the way. So trained law enforcement chaplains desire to help with many things, but certainly with resiliency. And we believe a lot of the things that we do already help to promote resiliency. But with this program, we're taking it to another whole level. And we want to be a resource. And many times we're referring people out. And we always tell our chaplains, have a list of phone numbers and agencies that you can work with. Because you're not going to be able to help everybody with every problem they have. So you're going to have to refer them out to other agencies that can help them with some of the issues that they might have. And that's a big part of it as well. But we want to be there for the officers and the departments. I want to close with this picture. This is my friend Mark Johnson. Mark was a New York City police officer for a number of years, worked the streets of New York, and ended up with PTSD, became an alcoholic, and a number of times considered taking his life, was almost ready to take his life one day, and a chaplain reached out to him. And Mark told me the story many years later. The chaplain was the one who helped to turn him around. Mark was able to get the help that he needed to have ongoing, ended up going into the FBI, became an officer in the FBI and did a number of things in counseling in the FBI. He also got his PhD degree. He went on to work in a lot of different areas. He wrote a book about his life, an incredible book about his life. And then when 9/11 happened, Mark, as an FBI agent at the time, went right away to the World Trade Center, and he breathed all that air. So years went by, as we see happening now. Years went by, and Mark got a rare cancer, went to the University of Penn, and they determined he had this rare cancer. But in the midst of all this, Mark became the training officer for the Atlantic County Training Center and used to set up the trainings. And Mark had a burden for officers, as you can imagine. So about two and a half years ago, Mark called me up, and he said, I want to start a support group in Atlantic County for officers that have either been shot in the line of duty or have shot somebody in the line of duty. And many of them are not working, and they're off the job now, but they're going through stuff, and I want to start a support group. Can you come and help me with a support group? Can you be the chaplain for the support group? And I said, absolutely, Mark, let's do it. So that support group continues because Mark is no longer with us. And those pictures you see there last May at the National Police Week, when they put the names on the wall, Mark's name was put on the wall because he died as a result of serving at the World Trade Center after 9/11. And so we want to carry Mark's legacy around. But it was a chaplain that helped to turn him around. There were other things, but it certainly was a chaplain that helped to turn Mark around. So we want to tell you that story, and that inspires me to continue to do what I do. And I hope it inspires our chaplains, and I hope it will inspire you. Because Mark went from almost down to taking his life all the way the other direction, totally the other direction, and then his desire to help others. And he recognized that chaplains needed to be part of that component. So that's our presentation this afternoon. I think we're getting you out of here early. Rob, are you here someplace? Rob's going to close this out. Rob's only going to talk for about another half hour, and then you'll be glad to get out of here.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes day one of the Resiliency Summit. Before everybody leaves, a few housekeeping announcements. The missing phone was actually a reporter from ABC. She did send a text saying, well, if she was to leave it anywhere, I guess this is the most safest place to get it returned to her. So we will make sure that happens. Tomorrow, again, we have a start time 7:30 when we can start setting in. For those that actually, signing in, excuse me, for those of you that actually took the buses, DOC has the bus outside. You are literally going to be, to get back to your parking area, you are going to be taking the bus from across the street to your parking area. And again, thank you for DOC for providing that service. We will see all of you tomorrow. Be safe. Have a safe trip home.